longest title ever. I saw this over the weekend. I have seen the first Hunger Games movie, and I've read the first Hunger Games book. People told me that the first book was the best, and so I didn't bother reading anymore after that. But I
Wow.
have not seen that movie in over a decade. This takes place 60, 70 years before the events of the first Hunger Games. This is, I think, the third annual, so they're very new, and the world is actually reminds me a lot of the video game BioShock, this kind of retro futuristic place where everything looks like the 60s, but they have technology that we don't have. We meet Coriolanus Snow, who I completely forgot who he was at all, but he is the main villain in the original Hunger Games movies and books. He's like the president of Panem. So we see this movie is his origin story, which I didn't know. I thought this was going to be about Rachel Zegler's character. Um, she is of course pulled as tribute to be part of these early Hunger Games, and Snow is part of this elite tier of people, this kind of aristocratic class, but his family is going poor, and he needs to find a way to kind of save their reputation. These kind of aristocratic people are sent to be mentors to the tributes, help them survive. He, of course, gets paired with Rachel Zegler's Lucy Graybaird, who's kind of a gypsy character who sings. She sings a lot. Of course, Rachel Zegler has an amazing voice and was in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. So that they gave her a bunch of opportunities to sing, and it kind of feels weird because no one else sings in the thing, but they do make her a musician, and they get paired together. They have a little bit of a romance, but he has a lot of ulterior motives. This movie's really long. It's almost three 3 hours. It was all right. It's got some things that work. It's got some things that don't. Probably definitely for fans of the series though.
So I am the perfect person to ask you about this because I have not read any of the Hunger Games books. I haven't seen a single film. So great. But I've got some, I think, good rounded questions that'll appease those of us who have seen them and maybe, keep you interested if you haven't, just like me. So first question, Hunger Games, regarding kind of the trappings of the universe, it is a wildly imaginative visual feast. It's lots of bold colors and huge costumes and
Sort of.
cosmetics and wigs. Yeah, and I wanted to ask about our cast in it, right? Some big names. We've got Tom Blythe, Rachel Ziegler, you got Viola Davis, Jason Schwartzman, Peter Dinklage, Hunter Schafer, a bit of a newcomer. How do these very real people juggle this very fictional world? Because to look at the trailers, it looks like they're reading Shakespeare. Like it's the realest thing ever. Like for a 2.5 hour film, are you tuned in the whole time, or do you find yourself slipping out of interest?
Like I said, this is definitely for fans of the series. I couldn't remember anything from the first Hunger Games. Like, I didn't know who Coriolanus Snow was. I couldn't remember, even though he's the main antagonist of the original books. So I just didn't remember a whole lot. I feel like this cast is somewhat wasted. Like, Viola Davis is great. She does this very incredible kind of villain thing that she's so good at. Peter Dinklage is also really good. He's not in it enough, kind of. I wish his character was in it a little bit more. Jason Schwartzman kind of plays this late night host and does a good job with that. But our star is Tom Blythe. He's fine. Rachel Zegler is great, but it's just
He's
like I said,
acceptable.
I've read the first book and seen the first movie, and I just like don't really remember the world very much. To kind of catch everyone up, if you're not familiar, the Hunger Games are a set of like kind of Olympic games, and it's a kill or be killed, where 12 to 24 young people from each district in this fictional place, which is basically a post-apocalyptic North America. Two tributes are chosen from each district, and they put them in an arena and say go at it, and they all have to try and kill each other and stay alive. They're people, and they watch this on TV very much like Truman Show-esque. It's very gladiatorial combat, and they can get help from outside. There's a whole like PR thing that has to happen as well. You have to get people on your side. You got to get people to donate money and your cause and send you stuff while you're in the arena. This takes place in a very small arena, which is different from the original films and books. In those, it's like, it's like you're in the wilderness in those original books. You start in this arena and then you go out into like the forest and things and you have to hide. This is just like a small arena the size of like a football field. So it's a much different setup, which was a big surprise to me. Like I said, there's so much, like, if you are not familiar with this property and the books and the films, like, you're going to be pretty lost. I was pretty lost, and I've read one of them.
All right. So I was going to say, as far as engaging in the larger universe, I wanted to ask about how this film kind of stands. It is a prequel, right? It's before the events of the previous films, but it's also a little smaller in scope. Looking at the runtime, 2 hours, 37 minutes, that's a lot of movie. I know there's supposed to be more of these, right? I wanted to ask about how this kind of fits in, at least the idea of an immediate setup to be followed by a sequel or two, right? Like, I'm assuming this is not going to be the only one.
So this is based on a book. Like, Suzanne Collins did write this prequel, and it is a standalone book, but this movie doesn't feel like a standalone movie. It feels like it's open for more. We'll see if we get that. It's way too long. The first two acts feel like one movie, and Act 3 then, which is another 45 minutes, feels like a completely separate movie. And it's the one time I think I'll probably say that this probably should have just been two different films or a series of sorts. Like, it doesn't really work. It is a little boring in times. There's a whole lot of table setting, lots of people talking in rooms for a long time, setting things up. The action pieces work pretty well, but it's also like, it's PG-13 violence, so I'm just like, I never feel like anyone's like really in danger. Maybe that's just because I've watched too much horror. So yeah, it's way too long. It should have been, I think, either two movies or just really kind of cut down more. There's so much dialogue. The film is also way too dark visually. There's a whole lot of like night scenes or people talking in dark rooms, and I cannot see anyone's face. Like, especially if you're a person of color, like, oh my gosh, I can't not make out any facial features at all. It's a really strange choice.
That exposure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, then one more question, because this is a mini review. Yeah, regarding its box office, right? Like, I think I was reading that one of the reps for the film said, or the studio said, it underperformed domestically, but I think overseas it a little overperformed. So ultimately, I think Lionsgate produced this. They're pleased. Like, they said, yeah, we're good, which, like, fine. But, like, if you're going to do a few films, which I was under the impression that was kind of the move, but maybe that hasn't been announced. Maybe I'm just got fatigue from, like, young adult series being turned into multiple films. What do you think they may need to change to pivot to some bigger numbers? Because typically, like, subsequent films don't do better. Do you think there needs to be a shakeup? Do you think they should maybe not do anymore? Do a series? Like, I think Lionsgate is interested in continuing the Hunger Games universe in some fashion. Having seen this, what do you think?
I think they got to have less talking, man. There's so much just setting things up, and so many characters. Like, I had a hard time remembering all the characters' names. They just got to pick up the pacing. I think so. We kind of see our character Coriolanus Snow, he's the antagonist in like the main films, but he kind of is an okay guy initially, but eventually his like need to get ahead and win, and this like kind of turns into a bad guy along the way. It's somewhat of a villain story. So, there's another 60, 70 years, but between this and the next one, I'm sure they could come up with, ways that moves forward.
Yeah. Maybe they'll do like HBO's doing with Dune, and do like a prequel series, the Bene Gesserit sisters, right? About Viola Davis before she got to running the Hunger Games or something. I don't know, but either way, like it seems like there's some more. It seems like there's more gas in the tank, being on the outside looking in. Would you agree?
I don't know, because it was $100 million movie, and it's only made $100 million. And you got a ton coming out. I'm not sure what kind of legs this have. It could kind of catch fire, no pun intended, with its core audience, and it might have legs. At the same time, there are like 7 new releases in the last week, including 4 releases tomorrow on Wednesday to contend with. So we'll kind of see. It depends on what kind of legs this movie has.
Andy, would you recommend The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
I would only recommend it to fans of the series. If you've read the books, you've seen the movies, you're a big fan of the universe, really familiar with it, the way, you know, nerds like myself with are familiar with comic books and Star Wars. If you're that familiar with this, probably see you'll enjoy it. People that I know that have read the books and stuff have enjoyed it. I thought it was way too long. It's nearly 3 hours. It feels like two movies squeezed into one. Way too much talking. The action scenes work pretty good, but I think it's definitely for the fans.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, folks. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, one for the fans. And speaking of one for the fans, I'm really excited to talk about this last feature. It almost pains me that we had to make this the last feature on this episode, but we talked about it and we figured Thanksgiving was the big release, and that's kind of what people are more interested in seeing. And then we wanted to cover Hunger Games, but I'm so excited to talk about this movie. This is a very special film from director Alexander Payne. I'm going to be doing the intro, so please excuse my clumsy delivery. The movie is The Holdovers.